You face battles most never fought, pain, struggle, adversity. But here, we use that as fuel. This is the Battle Harder podcast, where we motivate, educate, and inspire warriors of life. Veterans, survivors, leaders. We share stories and strategies to turn pain into progress. Here's your host, Coach Rob. Let's lock in and battle harder.
What's up, guys? This is Coach Rob. I'm the host of the Battle Harder podcast, where I hope to motivate, educate, and inspire you to become the best version of yourself. Today's episode is a very special episode. We're going to talk with a man known as Ray Martin. He is also known as the Daily Explorer, and this episode is entitled From Collapse to Conscious Living with Ray Martin. Ray, if you'd like to come on camera, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Hi, Rob. It's a pleasure to be with you and your listeners.
Awesome. I'm so happy you're here, and I look forward to getting into your amazing and interesting story. Before we get into that, currently give us, where are you talking to me from, and what do you currently do right now?
Yeah, I'm talking from a small town called Leighton Buzzard, which is about just on the edge of London in the UK. And I work as a leadership coach and help people improve the way they lead and manage teams. That's
pretty awesome. And, you know, that's what the Battle Harder podcast is all about, is turning pain into progress. And so start from wherever, you want to start from. We basically spoke about a little bit of your background. So let's speak on the downfall. What happened to you that was that moment that completely changed your life?
Yeah, I'll answer it as briefly as I can, Rob. I was following the conventional path that I was told as a school child to get a good job or get a good career, get a good home, get a wife, get kids, that kind of thing. Trotting along really nicely, but I'd, made a choice to start a business with the person I was married to. So my business partner and my wife was one and the same person. And 10 years into our business venture, which was really, really successful, I'd become the Daily Telegraph Business Leader of the Year in the UK.
Oh, wow.
She came back suddenly one day from a meeting and said, "I'm leaving you and I'm leaving the company." It was a huge shock. I didn't see it coming. It really, really threw me into disarray. And at the same time, my father got very ill and he died shortly afterwards.
Oh, wow.
So within sort of 3 or 4 month period, I was leaving my marriage. I was out of the home I was living in. My dad had gone and the business was going to be changing irrevocably. And it was to put it mildly, it was a really, really difficult year that year for me. I was on the floor, very dark and depressed and upset and grieving.
So yeah. When that happened, like how long were you married to your wife at that time?
We were together 12 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. And was it this downward spiral, like, how, if you want to share, how deep and dark did it get? I mean, did you like literally lose essentially everything, so to speak?
Well, not financially. We were okay on that level to separate our lives when we got divorced, but we lost everything that meant something to me. Yeah, it was really shocking, especially the marriage itself, but also the business was never going to be the same again because we co-authored it and created it together and ran the company together. So yeah, it was a bit of, it was a very difficult period, and I just sort of lost all my energy for life. I kind of wanted to curl up into a ball and hide in a cave. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I certainly didn't want to have any relationships at that point.
And how did that affect like your relationships with any friends or family that were, not directly linked to the marriage?
Yeah, mainly I just isolated myself, Rob, and just wasn't, very sociable particularly. And just sort of mourned the loss of the life I was in, whilst really trying to figure out why it had happened and what I should do next. And that was when a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, reached out and suggested the idea that I might take a sabbatical for 6 months. And that started to gestate in my mind.
So what was the point where you like accepted that and you're like, okay, I'm going to go on this sabbatical and kind of just throw my hands up in the air and see what happens? Like, where was that shift or what shifted that perspective for you to do that? And then let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, something happened before that, which was I was so in a dark hole that I couldn't get out. It was like it felt like when you're scrambling up a 20-foot well and it's this mud,
And you
wet
just like
mud
keep
on the walls.
slipping.
I was just climbing. I couldn't get out and
Right.
couldn't see a way forward. Really couldn't. And working as a leadership coach at the time, it was completely bonkers that I couldn't see that, but it was true. And one friend said, if you're ever in that situation, one thing you can do is you can find someone who really needs help and go and help them 100% and take your attention off yourself for a while. And in doing that, something might shift because you're
Right.
not thinking about yourself. And I thought that was a really good suggestion. And I reached out to a friend of mine who'd left England to go and live in Australia with her husband, and they'd had a young child, about a year or two before. And I'd heard she had breast cancer.
Oh, wow.
And so I called her and said, "Look, I'd really, if you'd like me to, I'd really be happy to come over for a month and just take care of you while you're having your treatments and look after the family and just be around and help." She said that would be brilliant. So I did. I went to Australia and spent a month with her. Of course, at the end of the month, nothing had changed. I was still in the same dark hole because my friend who gave me the advice never said, "Oh, it might take a few months or a time lag for something to shift." But nothing immediate happened. And I then had a few days left to visit another friend in Australia. I went to stay with her and her mum. And they said, "We're going to see a play this week. You can come with us." And in the interval of the play, I was reading the program and I saw they were auditioning for the next play, which was going to be on after I'd left. But it was about an English member of parliament. And I said to them for a joke, "I should be in that because I've got the perfect accent." Wasn't an actor, of course, but
Right.
and he said, "Well, we actually know the director of the play. Why don't you go to the audition? Because you'll still be here."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Of course, why? Why should I? We're not going to be in it." They said, "Well, just do it for fun." So I did. I went to the audition, flew back to England, and then 2 days later, I got a call from the director of the play saying,
You got
"We
the
would
part.
really, really, really want you to be in this play,
Nice.
the lead role in the play." And I said, "You're kidding me, aren't you? You've got all these paying customers." They said, "We think you'll be really good. We'll help you prepare. You've got 3 months to get ready. We'd really like you to come." And I checked in with some of my clients and stuff like that. They all gave me their thumbs up, which I took as a confirmation signal. And I flew back to Australia and spent 3 months and was in that play. And that was what gave me the confidence to take the sabbatical.
Okay. So, dealing with your friend that had breast cancer, and I understand it was probably how did that help you, I guess, therapeutically as far as trying to stave back or put back that trauma that you had initially, and then shifting from that, like you're going from a big shift from helping someone that's, having severe medical history and then going to act in a play. Like, what did you feel emotionally between the two, and how did your mindset start to shift to start to heal from everything that you were dealing with and going through?
Yes, it's a great question. I mean, it wasn't easy for me. But the month I had with Elizabeth, her name is, and I wrote about her in my book, so people will see that if they read the book. That just gave me a chance to take a break from the pattern of thinking that I'd been stuck in for a long time. It just completely broke it, really, and I felt really good being in service to her. It just sort of lifted my spirit, put me in a slightly different trajectory from that point on. And so when I went to do the play, I had enough space between my problems and my challenges and the opportunity that was being presented to say, okay, yeah, I could do this. I could actually handle this.
Did that lead to any more acting, or was that like just a one and done kind of thing? Or?
No, I knew a couple of actors back in the UK who were friends, and my brother's married to an actress. And I saw it wasn't really I've seen through their lives, it wasn't really the life I really wanted, but it was a great opportunity for me to do something that I would never have ordinarily got the chance to do. And and it was a breakthrough for me. That was what gave me an epiphany doing that play. So
Okay. And do you feel, as a coach and as a man, especially, like, we're told to kind of hold back our emotions and not feel things that we need to feel. when you're helping other people, regardless of what situation that is that somewhat of a therapy for you? Does that help you overcome other problems that you may have in your life?
What, allowing surfacing the emotions or experiencing them fully?
I mean, your servitude to others, does that help you deal with your own personal issues on a daily basis, so to speak?
Well, it did in that particular circumstance. Yeah, I say in general, it's always a great thing. I think the 5 human needs we all have are recognition, belonging, service is one of them. Variety, I can't remember the last one, but certainly it's a human need that everybody has to some degree or another, and it goes up and down like a graphic equalizer depending on the circumstances. But yeah, I think I work in a service capacity to help others grow. So I'm lucky that my daily work is helping people grow.
Right,
So I
right.
kind of feel like I'm constantly in that stream.
So let's talk about a little bit, because you're gonna have to explain this to me. And if I pronounced it wrong, the Vipassana retreat.
Oh, Vipassana.
Yeah.
Vipassana.
Okay.
Yeah,
Vipassana. What is that? What did that do for you?
yeah.
Because you really talk about how this shifted your entire relationship with your pain and your purpose
Yeah.
and everything. So this is what I want to explore now and learn about.
Oh, I'm really glad you asked me that question, because when I heard about it, I had no idea what it was. I'd never even heard that word. I was just 6 months in Thailand, in
Okay.
Asia, and I was thinking about going back because my 6 month sabbatical was nearly up. But I was feeling still a lot of guilt and shame and agitation and fear about the future from having, been divorced prior
Right.
to leaving. So I wasn't ready. I didn't feel like I'd really healed or got a new insight, a deep new insight yet. And I was agitated. And I remember I met a fellow traveler and I was talking to them about it. And they said, why don't you do a 10-day silent meditation retreat in a Buddhist monastery?
Oh,
There's
wow.
many in Thailand. And the monks invite lay people, foreigners, to come in for 10 days, and they create the conditions where you can, learn how to meditate and enjoy the benefits of meditation and the deep insight that it leads to. And of course, I wanted some deep insight. And I said, describe what happens. He said, well, you get up at 4 in the morning and you exercise, then you meditate for several hours a day, and you have 2 meals, and you sleep and you get up again. So I thought, my God, I've never been silent for 10 minutes, 10 hours a day of being silent. And you can't talk in the evening when you go to your room. It's completely no talking
Oh, wow.
at all for 10 days. So I thought, yeah, this would be brilliant if I could do it. So I decided to go for it. And I did get through those 10 days, in a lot of physical pain some days, because I wasn't used to I don't do yoga or stretches like that. So my physical body was new to it all. But I found that when I left the monastery, it was as if I'd had a volume knob on the side of my head that was a physical dial.
Right.
When I went in, it was like 9 or 10 out of 10 noise inside my head. And when I walked out, it was like 1 or 2, it felt
Oh,
like.
wow.
I just felt so calm and so grounded and so able to sit in my situation without judging it, just observe what I was thinking and feeling with clarity, probably for the first time ever, to be honest. Not just the first time in that period.
So, is this something? Do you still practice meditation today? Is this
Yeah, I
something
do.
that's integral in your life? And
Yeah, it does. That introduced me to the whole concept and world and practice of mindfulness, which is ubiquitous now. But in 2006, when I did the first retreat, very few people I knew were practicing mindful living or mindfulness or knew anything about it. You couldn't pick up a daily newspaper and read about it because it wasn't
Right,
mainstream. But now it is.
right.
But it led me to be really curious about mindfulness, and I carried on. I joined a community of meditators and went every week while I was in Thailand. And then I joined an organization that taught a mindful leadership program and became certified as a facilitator. So, and I still do that today. I still teach that program today. So I'm heavily involved in the mindfulness way of life.
So, what would you say to people that maybe have like all this noise in their head and all this confusion as far as what they hear about themselves, how they see themselves? Like, what is one practical tip you could give someone to, like, I guess, immediately break the noise or get
Yeah.
them to be a little bit more at peace with a given situation.
Well, I think a good step always is to become aware of what you're thinking and feeling in any given moment, but try and become aware of that without judging yourself. That's a practice, you know. It's very, very difficult for us as human beings to look at anything without judging it. We're
Right.
so automatically programmed to judge
Right.
something we see or feel or hear. So that's the beginning, I think, is to start noticing that we have judgments about everything and try and notice that you do, because the noticing is what starts to separate you from your thoughts about it. And another thing I would definitely recommend is some still time every day. You know, it could be a walk, it could be a swim, it could be sitting, but something that enables you to be still and be quiet and just focus on your body and your breathing, not on your thinking mind, because we live in our heads. We don't actually live in our bodies, which is a strange thing because all animals live in their bodies. They're very instinctive and
Right.
intuitive, and they're always listening and sensing. But we are built that way, but we don't use our bodies like that.
And this is what I love, because I'm finding a common connection from everybody that I talk to,
Yeah.
whether they're mental health providers or thought leaders or coaches or people just telling their story of adversity, that the common thing is, if you can find a part of time during the day, whether it's going for a walk outside
Yeah,
without headphones or sitting in silence without TV. You know, we're so burdened by all this technology and music and TV and social media that a lot of people are not finding that time to just have a little bit of quiet time, so to speak. And that and some breath work and maybe even some gratitude or journaling can do wonders for helping you calm down and be at peace. And it's funny, I did
yeah.
a post yesterday on my social media, because essentially my whole world is falling apart right now. We don't have time to get into that. But
Okay.
I laughed during the post because I'm at this point in my life where the little things just don't bug me anymore. You know, if I leave my wallet somewhere, or a pipe breaks in my house, or it's just not worth wasting the energy to get angry and upset and
Yeah,
lose my temper and throw like what I call an adult temper tantrum over these mundane things that don't really affect our lives.
yeah.
So, talk a little bit on how you build or how you built a stronger inner foundation of yourself and like your visions, values, and your purpose.
Yeah, okay. There's a few things in there. Yeah, I've always considered when I'm asked that question, what's my purpose? The easiest way I could say it is that I feel like since I was a child, even I feel like I've been a torchbearer for greater human consciousness.
That's awesome.
I've always been fascinated about what makes a person tick. Mostly myself in the beginning, of course, because I was working in high performing jobs and I wanted to get the best results I could, and I was always reading books or talking to people that I thought knew something about how you get past all your own limits. so, so that was a subject of fascination. But so I continued that interest for the remainder of my life. But my vision in life is, especially now in the stage of life I'm in, I'm 64 now. My vision of life is just to spread more joy and happiness if I can.
That's awesome.
And I'm a very big believer in people finding their own true path. This is where I think real happiness is authoring your life in a way that's unique to you. Because in the book that Bronnie Ware wrote, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, is a very famous book. It's sold millions of copies worldwide.
Awesome.
She works in a hospice. She asks people in the last days of their lives, what do you most regret? She said, they all say the same 5 things, Rob. No different. Tens of thousands, they all say the same 5 things. The number one regret is, I wished I'd lived my life true to myself and not the life that others expect of me. And I read that book at the point where I was just about to start my divorce proceeding and we were burying my dad. And I thought, wow, I think so much of the life I'm in, being a CEO of a company and living in London and having an affluent lifestyle, so much of that is the life that others expected of me. It's not really the life that I actually really wanted to create. And now I'm being given a chance to get on a different track and start a new life, except I don't know what the life is that I really want. I haven't got that clear yet. So that's why I decided to take the sabbatical and try and discover that, and why doing meditation and things like that really started to help me get intuitive wisdom from inside myself, which I didn't have access to before. That's one of the big benefits of living mindfully, is you start to turn up the noise of your inner wisdom voice, which you can't hear very well when you've got very noisy thinking going on.
Right, definitely. Man, that's some awesome, very profound things that you're saying there. And so me being 48, I just turned 48, and you being a little bit older than me, do you believe that any time, like, it doesn't matter your age, that if you're not happy, you can always the next day pick that thing that you want to do to get essentially towards your purpose, or what makes you happy, or what makes you to be the best version of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, when you start to understand the teachings of the Buddhist monks and other people that have followed them throughout the hundreds of years we've been around as a civilization, you realize they all point to the same understanding, which is basically that we don't live in our experience of life. We live in what we think about it. We literally experience our lives through our thinking. And so we can change our experience of life by changing how we're thinking. It's not what happened. You know, most people know the cliche statement. It's not what happens. It's how you respond to it, or it's how you think about what happens. And that is really, really absolutely true. But it's a really hard thing to really get and really start to change in how you're operating with your own thinking system. And that's the challenge.
Definitely. And it's funny because I had to ask a neuroscientist this to get his perspective, and I really truly believe how we speak to ourselves and how we put that out into the universe shapes and forms who we're going to become.
Yeah, it does.
And I always like to tell people, like, I was a very negative person as a veteran and police officer with PTSD and major depressive disorder. I always operated in the black. I was always negative, always life sucks. And when I had that mindset shift to practice a little bit of gratitude and say, I'm okay, and life is good, and life is worth living, that subconsciously really does work. And what's funny is I think people don't realize the simple things of just thinking positive and realizing that there's millions of other people that have a life worse than yours, that it's not that serious to be negative and upset and angry and frustrated all the time. And if we can have those little mindset shifts, we can be better apt to deal with life's problems. You know, we all have bad days, but how we deal with them is what's important. And you can deal with them from a perspective of positivity and happiness and gratefulness, or you can be negative, where I know firsthand that things go 5,000 times worse than just saying I'm okay. So basically, like, on your journey between the meditation and your mindset shifts and everything, from what I understand, and we're kind of backtracking a little bit, but this was like a 14-year total journey, right?
It never was intended that way.
You
But
told me, I want to hear this story about, because if I remember right, you said in our conversations you lived out of a backpack for like...
Yeah, I took a backpack to take the sabbatical. I went to Asia, and I'd sold my house in London prior to leaving, and I got rid of pretty much everything in it because I didn't want to store it, because I didn't know I'd come back and live in the same house. I wasn't sure what I was going to do after this 6 months, because I had no children from my marriage, so I knew I was free to reinvent my life in any way I chose. And so I thought I might not even end up living in England again. I didn't know that. So I decided to go minimalist, like Ryan Nicodemus and Joshua
Extreme
Fields.
minimalist.
And I left myself with a bag of clothes, 20 kilos, and a laptop, and that was all I had.
Oh, wow.
And so, so after 6 months, I just didn't want to go back to England or do anything to resembling what was my former life, because I was still learning. I'd just done the retreat with the monks, and I wanted to practice more meditation, and I was meeting fantastic people who were helping me get insight about the new path. So I carried on and lived in a place called Chiang Mai in Thailand, which is a great place to live. Very vibrant and open-minded community of young people traveling and stuff. And I just stayed there and made friends. And then I just bumped into things that I really wanted to take part in. Like I went to an elephant sanctuary where they were rescuing elephants. I went to an orphanage in Nepal where I did a picnic for these orphan children, and I started to think, God, I wish I could do more to help these people that are running these things, because they need money. They really need money. They don't get any government grants or funding.
Oh, wow.
And then I met a guy just by chance who was a marathon runner, and I was nearly 50, and he'd run 6 marathons, and he told me about it. He was 10 years younger than me. And I said to him, Matt was his name. I said, Matt, do you think I could run a marathon? Because then I could raise some money for some of these things. And he looked at me and he said, well, you look quite fit. Have you ever run before? I said, no, not at all, not even 100 meters. He said, look, I'll tell you what, I know why you want to do this, Ray. If you decide to stay here for 6 months, I will personally train you how to run a marathon and get you on the start line for your first one. So I shook hands with him and said, okay, I'll do it. And so I knew then I was going to commit to starting a foundation and fundraising. I raised, for that first one, I was able to raise $15,000 US dollars.
Nice.
And I ran, the first one I ran was the New York Marathon. I got a flight to New York through my brother who worked for the airline. And I ran the New York Marathon in 2009, raised that money, brought it back to Asia, and literally took it myself to the elephant sanctuary and to the orphanage and worked with builders and teams to get things done. I managed every penny of it myself because I didn't want it to be slipped away or frauded or anything. And so that was a huge learning curve for me. That whole project took 2 years nearly. So I was already now 2.5 years into the journey.
I think that's an amazing testament. Most people, humans themselves, don't do that. You really, really went down a path of self-discovery.
Yeah, I did.
And just experiencing life.
And trying things I was no good at, never done before, on a steep learning curve. But I just felt it was what I needed. I wanted to shake off any idea of who I thought I was and all the like, when you leave something, you think, well, I've got to do something quite similar, otherwise I can't really do it. I didn't want to be in that box. I wanted to just be free to choose. I've ended up doing work that I used to do in a weird sort of way, but it feels completely different. But anyway, that was 2 years, and then I started coaching people in Asia. And before I knew it, it was 14 years had passed, and I came back to England to finish writing the book.
So do you continually go back to Asia and do work out there? And
it's a good question. I hadn't been back for 7 years, but Christmas just passed. Me and my partner Carolyn, we took 2.5 months away from England. We went to stay in Chiang Mai, so I did go back for the first time and reconnected with a lot of my friends there and stuff like that. So I did.
How did that feel?
Oh, mate, brilliant, brilliant, amazing. It's a beautiful place. It's just such a great country, and I love the culture of that part of the world. Yeah, it's lovely.
And I love the whole story, because essentially it sounds like you took like this old shell of who you were, and you were just kind of chipping away, and now you have this renewed version. And here on my podcast, I feel the energy. Like, you seem like you're a very happy person, and that's awesome. Yeah. And that's the ultimate goal is just to be happy and live
I think so.
Purposeful life. What tips or what can you say to someone that may be having trouble finding their purpose? Because I think purpose is the biggest thing why we have the issues we have. If you don't have purpose, you're kind of lost at times. So
first of all, just know that a huge percentage of the population really struggle to have any sense of what their purpose is. It's very few people that have a really strong sense of it. So it's okay to not know. It's taken me, like 50, 60 years to get clarity about my own. It's not something I had clarity about earlier in life.
Right.
I think one of the easiest and best places to start is what are my values? What's important to me on a daily basis? This is one of the entry points, I think, if you've never thought like this before. Because if you know that, so for example, you value being in community, there's no way you should take a job where you work alone doing data analysis or something. It just will kill you. So you've got to be aware of the things that on a daily basis are really important to you. What kind of people do you like spending time with? What kind of work environment is one that really feels good for you? Do you want to work in something that is kind of stretch and grow you, or do you want to just do something that provides finance support for your life so that you can go and sail at the weekends or whatever it is, But just clarity around values, I think, is a really good start point. Because for me, I realized when I looked at my life, I thought the 4 things that are most important to me in the next 20 years when I was in this journey I'm talking about was I want freedom to make original, authentic choices about anything I do. I do not want to make choices that just copy the mainstream. Even though some things I choose do copy the mainstream, I'm consciously choosing those. But I don't want to default to the same choices because I can't think of anything that I really want. So freedom was about being authentic and original. Love's one of my values without doubt, because I can't imagine going through any day and interacting with people without bringing some kindness and compassion to those interactions.
I agree.
And I really, really wanted to embrace that fully and do things that enable me to do that and give and receive love in that way. Integrity, I've always had that since I was young, keeping promises, doing what I say, being a dependable, reliable person. And then exploration, like for me, being an explorer is a big part of my joy
Which
of
you
life.
definitely were. So
Yeah.
for a long
And so I really
time,
discovered that, because in all the years I'd lived before, I wasn't living up to that. I wasn't living that value. I was making money and being a good businessman, but I was not exploring. And that now my life is completely oriented around that.
So what would you say to someone that might listen to this and those people that are maybe scared of that jump off point of taking that risk because they are stuck in that
Yeah.
executive job or they are stuck in that bad relationship? Like, what words of encouragement could you give somebody in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously am not going to give an instruction that everyone should do it. You've got to know from your own inner wisdom if it feels right for you, for sure. But I would say that in all the cases I've seen where people have taken those leaps, I can't even think of 1 in 100 where it hasn't led to a better life eventually. It may be sort of a bit sticky in the beginning. It is going to feel uncomfortable and scary. There's no question of that, because whenever you leave a known for the unknown, there's always some discomfort, but that discomfort is what's opening you up to a bigger life.
Exactly.
So I just say, just get used to the discomfort and totally accept it and enjoy that phase. William Bridges talks about it in Transitions, in his book on transitions. He says you have an ending of your old life, and some point down the road there's like what he calls a new beginning, but there's a zone between, a third zone in the middle called the neutral zone. It can take several months to transition through that, and none of the same rules apply as they did in the end or in the beginning. You have a completely temporary set of conditions that you have to adapt to.
Right.
And this is the journey.
Yeah, I like to tell people all the time, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I know it's
you do.
easier said than done, but
Yeah.
anybody that has pulled on their heartstrings, like this is not right, like something just feels off.
Yeah.
I always tell them, like, you have to take that jump, and it is scary and it does suck,
Yeah.
but that's where all the growth happens. That's
Yeah.
how you become who you need to be. So to my understanding, you have a book out. Let's talk about that a little bit. And then after that, we'll do some final words and we'll end the show. So what's your book and what is it about?
Well, the book is an interesting story because when I was traveling, like 3 or 4 years into the journey, I kept meeting travelers and we'd have coffee or beers together. And they said, well, tell me, how did you start this journey you're on? And I tell them about the divorce and my dad and the play in Australia and blah, blah, blah. And we just talked for hours about those things. And at the end of the conversations, as we said goodbye, some of them would say, can I give you my email address? And I'd say, why? They said, well, because if you ever write a book about your journey, I'd really like to read it. So I'd really like you to email me if you do. And I just laughed and I said, come on, I'm not doing this to write a book. I'm not an author. I'm just doing this to heal myself. But when Rob, honestly, after about 5 or 6 years, I had about 100 email addresses.
Oh, wow.
And there were still 1 or 2 a month coming, and I thought, God, the universe wants me to write a book. It just suddenly dawned on me one day. It was about 2010, 5 years in, and I thought, oh my God, I'm being called to write a book, this story. And that's the next thing I'm stepping up to do, that I've no idea how to write a book. How long it's going to take or what you do or anything. And as I was having those thoughts, I saw on Facebook that someone was advertising a 5-day writers retreat in Chiang Mai, the place where I was staying.
Oh, wow.
She was coming from New York, a hugely successful literary agent and author, and she was coming to teach people the ins and outs of writing a book in this 5-day course. And it was $1,200. So I wrote to her and I said, 2 questions about what you're promoting, because I'm in Chiang Mai. I said, one is, can absolute novice beginners who've never written a word, can they do your course? Because it looks like it's for people who've got writing experience. And the second thing is, I can't pay $1,200. I'm running a foundation. I'm doing charity work. I could do maybe 500, but I can't do 1,200. And she wrote back and said, totally would love to have you there, and you can do it for $500. And I took those as a confirmation signal. I'm very big on this theme. That gave me the confirmation signal that I was doing the right thing, that was the right course to go on, that was the place I needed to go. It confirmed it to me. And so I signed up for that course, and in 2011 I did that course, and about 2 years after that I started writing the book.
Awesome.
But I didn't finish it till about 2 years ago.
And what is the name of the book?
Oh, it's called Life Without a Tie.
And is it basically your story plus memoirs, or
it's the story of that 14-year period, but I've drawn into the story a huge amount of reference material of things like transitions. I mentioned William Bridges' work, the minimalists, Ryan Nicodemus. I read about 50 books to write my book.
Awesome.
And so a lot of the understanding that I picked up and the trends and the shifts in societal thinking, they're all in the book. Plus, I had to write 10 guiding principles for myself to act as guide rails for my journey. So they're in the book. And my editors who helped me write it asked me to finish the book by writing my 6 rules for happiness. And so I've set those out. If you want to be happy, there are 6 rules to follow.
So would you like to share those with us, the audience, or do we have to buy the book?
No. I mean, I just don't know how much time you've got, Rob, but
as much time as you need, buddy.
Yeah, the 6 rules for happiness are lovely. You know, I found they really, really work for me. I'm not saying they'd be everyone's rules. If you read the 6 rules, you might say, well, I'd make a change to a couple of these.
Right.
And that's what I'm inviting readers to do. Say, use mine as a start point, and then inspire what your own would be. But the rules that I see as being happy are, number one, you've got to have a strong core foundation of self-awareness. That's the first rule. If you're not prepared to invest in your own self-awareness, you haven't got a hope of being really happy, because life is just going to confuse the hell out of you and push you around like a boat that's lost its mooring. You know, it's just, you've got to be willing to do the work of wisely reflecting on what's happening, reviewing what's happening, thinking about what beliefs you're holding, you know, thinking about your vision, thinking about your values. This is constant. You have to do the work inside. So that's number one. Build a strong core foundation of self-awareness. Number two, I'd say, be willing to take full ownership for everything that happens, particularly the stuff you don't like.
Definitely.
You cannot ever sit in a seat of blame or circumstance being the cause of your unhappiness. It's totally down to you as an individual to do what you need to do, or stop doing what you need to stop doing in order to actually have your life start to take the shape you want. So taking full ownership is a rule. Number three, and I first learned about this in the monastery, you've got to become your own observer. If you live inside your head and your thinking, and you're not aware that you and your thinking are separate things, and they're just meshed together, you're running your life in what I call autopilot. And when you're in autopilot, all the decisions are being made for you by your personality. You're not choosing consciously yourself. You're just being driven by your innate personality, which is a conditioned thing. So it's crazy to let that run the show. And so you've got to become your own observer and start noticing, I know I'm thinking that this is like this, but let me really examine it and see if it's really true.
Right.
I know I'm thinking I'm not good enough to do this opportunity, but is it actually really true? What if I did have a try? What would happen?
Right.
Things like that. So becoming your own observer. Number four, the rule for happiness is about relationships, because you can't do anything on your own. And my rule for happiness there is you've got to constantly build powerful, sustainable and purposeful relationships, intentional relationships.
Definitely.
So if you and I meet and we end up working together, I've got to sit down with you and say, we're not just going to show up at this place every day and do our work job and have a coffee and say goodbye. You know, we're going to share what each other's dreams and visions are for our lives. And then we're going to give each other feedback and support and challenge to help each other grow here. We're going to actually use our relationship intentionally and wisely.
I like that.
And so that's number four. And I've done that my whole life, and that's really served me well. In fact, I've never actually had to apply for a job ever or look for work. I've always had friends and people I know come to me and offer me things because I've got that intentional relationship with a lot of them.
And I think when you give yourself, like when you're the kind of person that'll give your shirt off your back for somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
Regardless if they'll take it or not, like good things happen, and you'll always have at least one person in your corner that if the things are bad or dark or situations look bleak, you could reach out and they're going to be right there and be like, I got you.
Exactly. Rule number 5 is proactively take care of your well-being. You cannot leave that to chance anymore. Well, you never used to think about this much.
Right.
But in the last 10 or 15 years, this has come, especially with the COVID pandemic. You saw how many people were having a really tough time in isolation during that period. So you've got to think about, how do I stay resourceful mentally? How do I look after my emotional well-being, my physical well-being, my spiritual well-being? How do I really take care of myself, especially when I'm working really hard, when I'm anxious, when I'm stressed? How do I constantly reset and regenerate myself? And that's a whole area on its own. So those are the first 5 rules of the 6. The 6th rule only works if you're doing the first 5. You can't do the 6th rule is really important, but you've got to be doing the first 5 for the 6th rule to work, which is when you've got the first 5 rules running, okay, you must find people and empower others to live the same way.
I love that.
Because if you're not taking everything you learn from life and showing other people how to benefit and use that in their lives, you're not integrating it fully. You only integrate it when you show someone else.
And I truly believe as humans that whatever gifts that God, the universe, whoever gave us, we have a duty to share that with people.
Yeah, we do.
That's how people become better. That's how people learn, just by you being on this show, I've learned some awesome things
Right.
that I can apply in my life. And that's why I do this podcast, is to tell these stories, because I want people to be able to overcome anything, whether it's from your perspective, my perspective, a neuroscientist perspective. So it was very amazing conversation to have you on here today. Where can they find your book, and where can they get in touch with you?
Oh, in America, most people buy the book on Amazon. That's the easiest place. So Amazon, but there's a website called lifewithoutatie.com.
Okay.
And people can find out about me and the book there. And some people, very few, but some people want a signed copy for some reason, and they can order a signed copy on the site there. And I'll send it from my home in England.
So to the people listening on YouTube, I will have all those links in the description where you can get a hold of Ray and speak to him further. Maybe you want to have him as a guest on your podcast, or you want to buy the book, get a signed copy. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. Before we sign off, Ray, what is your definition of turning pain into progress?
My definition of turning pain into progress. Well, it's a good question, and it's one of the 5 tenets I wrote recently in a paper. It's turning your experience of life from an outside-in experience to an inside-out experience. And Michael Neal wrote about this very beautifully in his book called The Inside Out Revolution. We all think, mistakenly since we were little kids, that happiness is what happens when events on the outside change or shift. And like if I get a promotion, then I'm happy, and it's because of the promotion. If I get a new car, it's the car that gives me the happiness. It's outside giving me the happiness inside. But that's not the truth. The truth is you generate happiness on the inside by being at peace, by being calm and settled. And then you radiate out your happiness and peace, and things in the world are then attracted to you, that come to you, that meet your needs. And so I would say that's probably how I would talk about it.
That's amazing, and I love that. And I think, inner peace is definitely the key to a very successful, happy life. That's
what we all want in the end.
Right.
Whether we're trying to get rich or get success or anything, it's all to bring that inner peace ultimately.
Right. And I think sometimes, like, it's always awesome to have nice things, nice houses, nice cars.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Nice trips, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, nothing.
But you can't put 100% of your emotional value on those things. They are just things. So
they are.
We have to put emotional value on what's on the inside, how we want the public to see us, how we want our spouses, our friends, our family, our kids to see us.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how we're going to live our legacy on the world. So I've been Coach Rob from the Battle Harder podcast. It was an awesome conversation with Ray Martin. Check out his book. Once again, all the links will be in the description. And until you next time, turn your pain into progress and always be fit for battle. Thank you.
You've just heard another battle-tested conversation. Now it's time to take action. If this episode lit a fire in you, subscribe on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, or YouTube so you never miss a moment that could change your life. Want to go deeper? Connect with Coach Rob at BattleFittedBrand.com for coaching, gear, and tools to help you turn your pain into progress. Remember, life will test you, but you're built to battle harder. Until next time, stay locked in, stay ready, and keep showing up.